Today, we are going to look at the dumbest ways Karens died. From a Karen that fell on her head after refusing to cooperate with house cleaners when she made a mess, to another Karen who got stabbed after trying to argue with a mentally challenged homeless man over littering. Let's dive straight in. It was March 23, 2017, in a quiet neighborhood outside Marietta, Georgia. Inside one of the older single-story homes, small details, shut blinds, a dog barking intermittently, and a week of missed grocery runs hinted that a preventable crisis had already progressed too far to stop. Melanie Crick, 42, worked part-time as a holistic pet blogger and occasionally sold homemade supplements through small online forums. Her posts were eclectic, often mixing genuine rescue dog care with unverified claims she believed were safer alternatives to veterinary medicine. She lived alone with 4 mixed-breed rescues and carried a strong distrust of conventional vaccinations. Melanie had long-standing tensions with her neighbors. She kept to herself and openly resented their complaints, and they, in turn, found her eccentric and difficult to tolerate. But the practical side of caring for multiple rescue animals involved real risks. Rabies vaccination in Georgia was tightly regulated, and unvaccinated animals were vulnerable to infection from wildlife common in the area, such as raccoons and feral cats. Melanie understood territorial dog behavior, but had little experience recognizing neurological symptoms, which can progress rapidly and unpredictably. In early March, Baxter, a 6-year-old mix, began showing agitation, snapping at empty space and pacing erratically. Melanie interpreted the signs as a reaction to recent dietary changes and posted in online groups seeking detox methods. She ignored repeated online and in-person suggestions to seek veterinary care, falsely believing vaccines could cause long-term harm. Those who tried to intervene later said she rejected any criticism outright, treating warnings as personal attacks rather than legitimate concerns. Neighbors later recalled seeing her restraining Baxter during walks as he jerked his head sharply and produced thick saliva strings, behaviors they had not seen before. By March 14th, Baxter exhibited classic neurological distress, difficulty swallowing, stiff posture, and sudden, unprovoked lunges. That evening, while a storm approached, Melanie tried to comfort him in the hallway despite his rigid stance and throat spasms, evident from a social media post she made with a picture of them. Investigators later reconstructed the attack from blood patterns and injury locations. Neighbors across the street heard a sharp scream, followed by repeated impacts inside the house. Melanie had likely crouched to pet Baxter when he lunged. Bite marks on both arms indicated he clamped down with full force, and tearing injuries on her left forearm showed he shook his head violently while she attempted to pull away. Blood spatter along the hall walls formed curved streaks, consistent with her retreating backward as he struck again. Forensic analysis confirmed the trajectory and intensity of bites, consistent with a rabid canine in the terminal stage. Baxter died later that night in the living room, likely from late-stage neurological collapse, after Melanie confined him in a small storage room. Over the next week, Melanie developed hydrophobia, agitation, difficulty sleeping, and intermittent throat spasms. She posted online that stress and lack of rest were causing the symptoms. The incubation period for human rabies, in her case, was unusually short, likely due to multiple bites to the forearms combined with virus load from saliva exposure. On March 23rd, a severe spasm caused her to collapse in the kitchen. A day later, a neighbor, noticing her back door partially open and the dogs barking continuously, called building security, who forced entry and alerted emergency services. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes and found her unresponsive, with foamy saliva and ongoing laryngeal spasms. Her posture and frothing were consistent with terminal rabies encephalitis. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Post-mortem examination confirmed furious rabies. Brainstem samples contained Negri bodies, and severe encephalitis was present. Untreated bite wounds showed localized infection and bruising from the initial assault. Secondary aspiration pneumonia aligned with the seizure activity that occurred before collapse. Her remaining dogs were quarantined according to state protocols. 3 tested positive and were euthanized, while 1 tested negative and was eventually rehomed through a regional rescue organization. All online accounts and posts were removed by family members to prevent further misinformation after the investigation concluded. It was June 9th, 2014. The morning tide along a restricted stretch of Malibu's coastline moved in slow, uneven pulses, and the wind carried a faint hum from the research facility positioned above the sand. Nothing seemed urgent, yet the posted warnings about unstable surf and fast-moving rip channels suggested a risk that didn't match the calm appearance. Jenna Mallory, 33, worked as a retail floor supervisor who supplemented her income with a small lifestyle blog. She curated images that suggested luxury she didn't actually have, often restaging moments until they appeared effortless. Friends described her as organized, but prone to chasing shots that looked spontaneous on camera. Sponsorship offers came from minor clothing boutiques that preferred photos in visually striking locations, which pushed her toward places that seemed exclusive or dramatic. She understood how tides affected reflections on wet sand and how early light could create a clean gradient behind her. She carried only a compact tripod and remote shutter, avoiding heavier gear that might slow her down or draw attention. The private beach she targeted was appealing because the gate kept most people out, giving her a blank backdrop. She likely knew nothing about the research facility's water flow sensors farther down the coast or how rip channels formed in narrow gaps between sandbars. Her focus stayed on composition, not current strength. Her plan that morning was simple: slip past the locked gate, take a few timed shots near the shoreline, and leave before anyone noticed. She had a pattern of bypassing restricted areas for photos, convinced that brief trespassing was harmless if it helped her content. The beach was posted with red letter signs warning of steep drop-offs and hazardous currents, but whether she overlooked them or dismissed them is unclear. As she set her tripod in ankle-deep water, a security guard stepped onto the sand nearly 200 feet away and began walking toward her. Witness accounts indicate she panicked at the sight of him closing the distance. Instead of returning to shore, she backed farther into the water while adjusting her camera. The guard called out and accelerated, prompting her to move deeper until the waves reached roughly mid-thigh to waist depth, where the rip began to form. She raised her arms in what looked like an attempt to explain herself, but another step placed her directly over a narrow rip channel identified later by lifeguards. The guard saw the shift immediately. A thin line of retreating water gathered around Jenna's legs, and in less than 2 seconds, she was pulled backward off balance. The force of the current carried her under the next breaking wave. The guard radioed for assistance while cautiously moving closer, but she disappeared behind a white line of foam. She surfaced once about 30 feet away, rotating unevenly as she tried to gasp. A stronger surge twisted her sideways and drew her farther out. Lifeguards reached the area within minutes and located her several hundred yards offshore, floating prone. She was unresponsive when brought onto the rescue board. CPR continued through transport, but her pupils remained fixed. She was declared dead. Deep abrasions across her ribs suggested she had been dragged over submerged rock during the initial submersion, and sand was embedded along her left arm. The coroner later listed the cause of death as saltwater drowning with blunt force trauma from underwater impact. Analysis of lung contents showed sand and organic debris, indicating active inhalation during submersion rather than passive water entry after unconsciousness. Afterward, the research facility installed an additional no trespassing sign at the gate. Local reports noted the incident briefly before attention faded, and the beach remained restricted without further public comment. It was October 3rd, 2015. A light, persistent drizzle hung over a residential stretch of Queensland, softening the edges of the recently disturbed soil near a drainage project. The saturated ground and half-finished trench suggested an unresolved hazard that the weather was making worse by the hour. Cheryl Dawn, 57, lived alone in the small house bordering the work site. She made part of her income selling handmade crafts at weekend markets, and neighbors knew her for frequent disputes about property lines, noise, and minor changes to the area. Since her divorce several years earlier, she had grown more sensitive to perceived disruptions around her home. She often viewed nearby construction as intrusive and destabilizing, and she preferred to correct these issues herself. Without outside responsibilities pressing her, her routine revolved around maintaining control over her environment. The trench near her property was approximately 4 to 6 feet deep and only a few feet wide, designed to prevent runoff from pooling around the homes during heavy storms. Workers used simple equipment: shovels, a compact excavator, and leveling tools to keep the channel even. The soil, already loose from previous digging, became unstable after repeated rains, forming pockets where the clay absorbed water unevenly. A person standing inside the trench risked compressing the sides and shifting the layers above them, especially when the walls were visibly saturated. Workers posted temporary barriers as a precaution, but these consisted only of cones and tape, insufficient to prevent human entry or withstand significant pressure. Her frustration with the project had grown since it began, and she blamed the trench for affecting the appearance of her property. That afternoon, the crew left early due to incoming rain, planning to reinforce the walls the next day. Cheryl watched them depart and grabbed a shovel, determined to refill the ditch herself. Despite the posted warnings and the soft ground, security footage from a shop across the street captured her stepping into the trench, estimated at 5 feet deep, as she likely intended to restore the soil line to what she believed was correct. As the drizzle intensified, the mud beneath her feet loosened further. She began pushing soil from the edge down into the trench, unaware that her weight was compressing a softened section behind her. Moments later, her left foot slid inward, forcing her to catch herself against the opposite wall. That pressure shifted the upper clay layer, which had absorbed enough water to hold several hundred pounds of saturated soil per linear foot, sufficient to create lethal compression. Scene reconstruction indicates the collapse initiated at the top edge of the retaining wall, propelling the weight of the saturated soil downward onto Cheryl's upper body. She was driven forward, her face contacting the soil while the mass compressed her chest. The right arm was folded beneath the torso at an abnormal angle, subsequently confirmed as dislocated. The continuing soil movement rapidly encased the lower body, effectively immobilizing her within seconds. Forensic analysis of the soil and respiratory tract confirmed inhalation of fine, wet clay particles during active struggle prior to complete airway compression. A worker returning to secure equipment hours later found her legs partially visible above the collapsed section and immediately called for help. Emergency services and firemen arrived within minutes. Excavation to free her took approximately 5 to 10 minutes due to trench instability and depth, and by the time of the recovery, they identified no signs of circulation. The coroner determined the cause of death to be traumatic asphyxia from soil compression, with secondary fractures of the clavicle and ribs caused by collapse pressure. Estimated time to death was likely between 1 and 2 minutes due to full chest compression at this depth. Her estranged sister arranged a brief funeral service. Local authorities completed the project the following week without public statements. It was August 22nd, 2013. The town library in central Ohio was quiet in the late afternoon. Nothing appeared urgent or unsafe, yet the open spaces and mobile equipment created conditions where a single misjudgment could escalate faster than anyone anticipated. Linda Halver, 50, had built a modest identity around her local access TV ranch show, where she aired grievances about community issues. A former Parent-Teacher Association president, she was known for assertive speeches and a tendency to amplify minor problems. Her show had fewer than 300 viewers, but she treated each segment as a performance requiring strong visuals. Local access equipment was basic: a compact camcorder, a tripod with worn hinges, and portable lights she rarely used. Shooting inside public buildings required working around furniture and reflective surfaces, which made stable camera placement difficult. The library's rolling ladder, used for reaching top shelves, was designed to stay anchored under body weight, but it could still move if the user shifted too far from center. The library's smooth floor increased that risk. She chose the library that day to record a segment on rising late fees. Staff asked her to stay in designated areas, but she ignored the guidance, insisting she needed creative freedom. A teen volunteer noticed her setting up and quietly recorded her from a distance, providing investigators with clear footage. Moments later, Linda spotted the rolling ladder and decided elevated height would make her delivery more authoritative, despite posted rules restricting patron use. She climbed to the third step, holding her binder upright like a podium. The ladder was already angled slightly off-center, and her movements introduced small shifts. She gestured wide, leaning back as she grew more animated, unaware of the wheels sliding several inches backward under uneven pressure. The teen volunteer later stated that the ladder's base rolled noticeably before Linda noticed anything. As she leaned again, the wheels slipped across the polished surface. The ladder rolled farther back, removing her support. Linda's center of gravity shifted behind the platform, and she fell from roughly 7 feet, rotating sideways. Witnesses heard a single crack when the back right side of her skull struck the corner of a wooden study carrel. She collapsed without bracing, producing almost immediate neurological incapacitation. Blood began flowing rapidly from the long scalp laceration, and her limbs showed brief, agonal movements consistent with severe brainstem injury. A librarian called emergency services, and paramedics arrived within 6 minutes. They found her unresponsive with fixed pupils, shallow sporadic gasps, and a depressed cranial deformity. Paramedics confirmed extensive cranial trauma and initiated assessment per protocol. Death was pronounced on scene. The coroner concluded she sustained a basilar skull fracture extending into the temporal bone with a massive subdural hematoma and brainstem contusion. Neurological incapacitation was effectively immediate. Library staff later removed the study carrel involved, replacing it with cushioned seating to reduce similar hazards. They also inspected other ladders in the library for potential instability. Her family cleared her home studio and donated her camcorder to the library's media section. It was March 19, 2018. A steady drizzle hung over Portland. Inside the narrow hallways, the air smelled faintly of dust and old carpet glue. The building's cramped units and poor ventilation created conditions where a small error with chemicals could escalate before anyone understood what was happening. Tessa Ryland, 29, managed a small DIY craft account with a modest following. She balanced part-time retail shifts with online posting, often turning her cluttered studio apartment into a workspace for late-night projects. Her style leaned toward emotional improvisation, which sometimes resonated with viewers, but also attracted criticism. A harsh comment accusing her of ruining crafting pushed her to attempt something more dramatic to regain attention. The materials she bought were designed for auto body repair, a thick, heat-curing adhesive and a powdered accelerator that reduced bonding time by triggering a rapid exothermic reaction. Used correctly with ventilation and gloves, the mixture hardened metal in minutes. Used improperly in confined spaces, it produced extreme heat, localized fire risk, and toxic fumes. Her single window and cluttered studio left minimal air circulation and little room to manage spills safely. She mentioned to a friend that she was planning to create a glitter effect by mixing the adhesive with craft materials in a plastic bucket. The idea sounded simple, but required precision she lacked. Evidence indicated that the bucket was old, warped slightly from prior projects, and set on the floor beside stacks of cardboard, synthetic fabrics, and other flammable craft supplies. The risk increased when she ignored the printed warning on the accelerator, indicating it should never contact skin or large adhesive spills, and that ventilation was required. Footage from the hallway camera showed her carrying the containers inside hours earlier, balancing them under one arm while scrolling through her phone. Neighbors later said they heard intermittent banging as she rearranged supplies. She worked kneeling, the bucket between her legs, trying to stir the adhesive while opening packets one-handed. Online tutorials suggested adding the accelerator gradually would control the reaction, but she did not recognize early signs of dangerous heating. Investigators reconstructed that the accident began with a small slip. The adhesive container tipped slightly as she pulled it upright, causing a palm-sized spill onto her left thigh. She tried to brush it away, likely spreading it. The accelerator canister, left open and unstable, fell sideways and discharged several grams directly onto the spill, triggering an intense, rapid exothermic reaction that produced searing heat and localized flames. Witnesses in adjacent apartments reported hearing a scream that rose sharply before fading into gasps. The reaction bonded the adhesive to her skin almost immediately and ignited the synthetic fabric of her pants, melting material onto her leg. Fumes rapidly filled the apartment, leaving scorch patterns and residue investigators later documented. Tessa stumbled into the hallway, leaving strips of melted fabric, adhesive, and skin on the floor. She made it several feet before collapsing near the stairwell. The reaction had largely immobilized her lower body within seconds, limiting how far she could travel. EMS arrived minutes later after a neighbor called, finding her conscious but in severe pain, unable to speak, with deep thermal and chemical burns covering more than 40% of her body. Smoke inhalation had begun affecting her breathing. She was immediately stabilized on scene and transported via ambulance to the nearest burn center for advanced care. However, despite aggressive treatment, she died hours later from acute thermal and chemical injury, compounded by inhalation of toxic fumes, causing systemic inflammatory response and multi-organ failure. Her unit was sealed for decontamination. Several tenants reported chemical odors lingering for weeks, and building management replaced flooring sections damaged during her escape. It was September 2nd, 2016 in Monterey. Heat settled heavily over the craft brewery district. Inside the converted warehouse that housed a small brewery, unfinished service areas created places where a single misstep could escalate before anyone reacted. Rosalia Peredo, 46, called herself a community organizer and often pressured small businesses into supporting her events. Her reputation was a mix of persistence and confrontation, especially when she believed a space did not meet her expectations. She planned a zero-alcohol book club gathering at the brewery to boost her own visibility, promising the owner favorable online posts in exchange for use of the venue. The brewery was small, with a tap room connected to production areas by a series of hallways originally meant for warehouse storage. The cellar access door, marked clearly for employees, sat directly at the top of a 14-step wooden stairwell near the restrooms. There was no landing at the door. Stepping through it placed a person immediately over the stair drop. Behind it, a steep flight of wooden steps led down to the fermentation tanks and cleaning supplies. The stairs were functional but unforgiving, with a metal pipe running along the ceiling just partway down. Staff relied on internal training to navigate the area safely and kept the door closed to prevent visitors from entering by accident. When Rosalia arrived and saw patrons drinking regular beer, witnesses reported she became agitated, insisting the environment violated the purpose of her event. She announced she would speak with the owner directly. The owner was in the back adjusting inventory, and staff attempted to redirect her, but she ignored them and walked down the hallway. The employees only sign was large and centered, yet she pushed the door open without hesitation. A bartender saw her momentum carrying her forward and tried to reach her, but was several steps behind, too far to stop her in time. The incident unfolded in seconds. Security footage showed the doors swinging wide under the force of her push, pulling her momentum forward. Expecting level ground beyond the doorway, she stepped with confidence and immediately met empty space above the stairwell. Her right foot dropped first, pitching her body diagonally. She fell down the 14 wooden steps, tumbling rapidly. Witness accounts aligned with video evidence. A loud impact sounded halfway down as the front of her forehead struck the exposed metal pipe running along the ceiling, causing a deep laceration and forcing her head to rotate sharply. She continued rolling, striking multiple stair edges before hitting the concrete floor at the bottom. When bartenders reached her, she was on her side with her neck twisted at an abnormal angle. Blood from her forehead and nose pooled beneath her, and she made shallow, irregular gasps that slowed quickly. Staff called emergency services within seconds, and paramedics transported her to the hospital. During transport, she remained unresponsive, showing no purposeful movement and pupils fixed in mid-dilated state. She died shortly after arrival. The coroner documented an atlanto-occipital dislocation, skull base fractures, and massive intracranial hemorrhage. Bruising and abrasions along her limbs and torso corresponded precisely to the stair edges and pipe impact locations, confirming the sequence of collisions. The angle of head impact and rotation aligned with the physics of the stair fall. The brewery installed a locking mechanism on the cellar door and updated its visitor area boundaries. Staff also added a short barrier beyond the door to create a small landing, preventing direct step-offs in the future. The book club dissolved after her death, with with members citing discomfort and uncertainty about continuing the group. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here.
It was June 18, 2017 in Mulhouse, France. Rebecca Berger, a 33-year-old fitness blogger with over 160,000 Instagram followers, was in her kitchen preparing a simple treat. Known for her vibrant posts about fitness, travel, and fashion, Rebecca had built a significant online presence sharing her healthy lifestyle. But on this ordinary Sunday, a kitchen appliance would turn deadly in the most unexpected way. Rebecca reached for her whipped cream dispenser, a common kitchen tool found in homes across France. These dispensers use small pressurized gas canisters to inject nitrogen into a metal container, creating the perfect whipped cream in seconds. What Rebecca didn't know was that this particular model had been recalled years earlier due to serious safety concerns. As she activated the dispenser, the unthinkable happened. Under extreme pressure, the canister exploded with violent force. A piece of metal from the device shot out like a bullet, striking Rebecca directly in the chest. The impact was catastrophic, triggering immediate cardiac arrest. Emergency services rushed to the scene. Paramedics managed to temporarily revive her heartbeat at her home, but Rebecca remained unconscious. She was quickly transported to the hospital, but the damage was too severe. The following day, Rebecca Berger was pronounced dead. The news shocked her followers and the fitness community. How could a simple kitchen tool cause such a devastating injury? The investigation revealed a disturbing pattern. This wasn't an isolated incident. For years, consumer safety groups in France had been warning about these exact dispensers. Since 2010, approximately 60 similar accidents had been reported, resulting in injuries ranging from broken teeth to fractured ribs. In one case, a victim told French radio, "I had 6 broken ribs, and my sternum was broken. At the hospital, I was told that if the shock and blast had been facing the heart, I would be dead now." That prediction had tragically come true with Rebecca's case. The dispenser that killed Rebecca had been manufactured by a company called Ardtime. They had actually recalled the product back in 2013 after previous accidents. But out of 160,000 units sold, only 25,000 were ever returned. The remaining defective dispensers, like the one in Rebecca's kitchen, remained ticking time bombs in homes across France. Days after her death, Rebecca's family used her Instagram account to warn others. They posted a photo of the exact type of dispenser that had killed her with a stark message. "Here is an example of a whipped cream canister that exploded and struck Rebecca's chest, resulting in her death. Do not use this kind of utensil in your home." Tens of thousands of defective devices are still in circulation. In one of her final Instagram posts, just days before the accident, Rebecca had written something eerily prophetic. "A beautiful day comes to an end. Lots of travel plans coming up and new projects. Sometimes I take a moment to reflect on everything I've already accomplished and what I'm about to live. That's when I tell myself that life is beautiful. We don't have a credit on time, so let's enjoy it to the fullest." The tragedy prompted renewed calls for stricter regulations on kitchen appliances and more effective recall systems. Consumer advocates pointed out that despite years of warnings, the dangerous products remained widely available. The French government's Consumer Safety Agency had issued alerts about these products since 2014, but their warnings hadn't reached enough households to prevent further accidents. Rebecca's death serves as a sobering reminder that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places, even in seemingly innocent kitchen gadgets. Her legacy lives on not only through the fitness inspiration she provided to thousands, but also through the increased awareness of household dangers her tragic story created. In the wake of her death, many manufacturers improved their designs, adding additional safety features to prevent similar accidents. But for Rebecca Berger, these changes came too late. It was June 8, 2014, in South Shields, England. Grant Adams, a 17-year-old apprentice bricklayer, was just waking up in his third-floor bedroom. The morning light filtered through his window as he stretched and got out of bed, unaware that the next few moments would change everything. Grant had a lot to look forward to. His girlfriend, 16-year-old Sharna Gardner, was 7 months pregnant with their daughter. They had already chosen a name, Rakia May. Grant had recently bought his first car and was taking driving lessons. His 18th birthday was just weeks away. Life was full of promise for the young father-to-be. His mother, 37-year-old Amanda Smedley, was downstairs preparing for the day. The house was quiet, a typical Sunday morning. In Grant's bedroom stood a freestanding sunbed, the kind with long glass UV tubes that his mother had been storing there temporarily. It was an ordinary household item that would soon become the instrument of an unthinkable tragedy. As Grant got out of bed, he stumbled over a wire on the floor. In that split second, he lost his balance and fell directly onto the sunbed. The impact shattered one of the glass UV tubes, sending sharp fragments flying. In a horrific stroke of bad luck, a glass shard pierced Grant's neck in 2 places, severing his jugular vein. Blood began pouring from the wound immediately. In shock and desperate for help, Grant pulled the glass from his neck, an action that only worsened the bleeding. Despite his injury, he managed to stagger toward the stairs, leaving a trail of blood behind him. He made it to the bottom of the staircase before collapsing. Amanda heard the commotion from downstairs, a couple of thuds from his room. "I shouted to him and I ran upstairs," she later recalled. "He was just there in a pool of blood. He was at the bottom of the stairs. He'd fell down them. He must have tried to come and get help." Panic-stricken, Amanda called for emergency services while her boyfriend tried desperately to stem the bleeding from Grant's neck. Paramedics from the Great North Air Ambulance Service arrived at the family home around 9 a.m. They worked quickly to stabilize him before airlifting him to Newcastle's Royal Victoria Infirmary. At the hospital, doctors fought to save Grant's life, but the damage was too severe. The glass had torn through his jugular vein, causing catastrophic blood loss. Despite their best efforts, Grant Adams passed away the following day, June 9, 2014. The news devastated everyone who knew him. For Sharna, the shock was unbearable. "It's heartbreaking to think my daughter will never get to see her dad through one accident," she said. "She will never get the chance to meet him, even though I know he will be looking over her." Grant's sister, 20-year-old Natasha, who had a 1-year-old daughter of her own, was equally devastated. "It's just tragic. He's been in so many stupid accidents with motorbikes, and we can't believe something like this has killed him," she said. In the aftermath of the tragedy, Grant's family made the decision to donate his organs, finding some comfort in knowing that his death might give others a chance at life. "It would have been what Grant would have wanted," Natasha explained. "There are people waiting for transplants, and hopefully Grant's organs will help someone else." 2 months after Grant's death, Sharna gave birth to their daughter, Rikia May. The baby was, in Sharna's words, the spitting double of Grant. Through her, a part of him lives on, a bittersweet legacy of a young life cut tragically short by a freak accident that no one could have foreseen. Grant's story serves as a stark reminder of how quickly life can change, how an ordinary object in an ordinary moment can lead to extraordinary tragedy. It was April 28, 2013 in Darjeeling, India. Sailendra Nath Roy, a 49-year-old home guard with the Siliguri Metropolitan Police, was about to attempt another death-defying stunt. The crowd of hundreds gathered at the Coronation Bridge over the turbulent Tiesta River had no idea they were about to witness a tragedy unfold nearly 70 feet above the raging waters below. Roy was no stranger to extreme stunts. He already held the Guinness World Record for traveling the farthest distance on a zip wire using only his hair, an incredible 271 feet achieved in 2011 at the Nimrana Fort in Rajasthan. In 2012, he had pulled a 42-ton toy train of the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway for 8 feet using only his ponytail. His feats had earned him local fame and the admiration of many who saw him as a daredevil with nerves of steel. Today's challenge was even more ambitious. Roy planned to cross the 600-foot zip line suspended above the Teesta River using nothing but his shoulder-length hair attached to a pulley. He wore a life jacket over his shirt and carried the Indian flag, symbols of his pride and confidence. The morning air was crisp as he prepared for what would be his final performance. At the starting point, Roy carefully attached his hair to the pulley on the zip wire. This was a technique he had perfected over years, wrapping his ponytail around a metal hook connected to the pulley system. With a thumbs up to the crowd, he launched himself from the platform and began his journey across the gorge. For the first few minutes, everything seemed to be going according to plan. Roy glided smoothly along the wire and the spectators cheered enthusiastically. He had completed about 40% of the distance when disaster struck. His ponytail became entangled in the pulley wheel, bringing his progress to a sudden halt. Suspended nearly 70 feet above the river, Roy found himself trapped. He frantically tried to free his hair, using his hands to pull himself forward along the cable. The crowd, initially still cheering, gradually fell silent as they realized something was terribly wrong. Roy's movements became increasingly desperate. He was trying to move forward, recalled Balai Sutradhar, a photographer covering the event. He was trying to scream out some instruction, but no one could follow what he was saying. After struggling for 30 minutes, he became still. For nearly 45 minutes, Roy hung suspended by his hair, unable to move forward or backward. There was no safety net below, no emergency team ready to assist, and critically, no doctor or ambulance on standby. The organizers had failed to arrange proper medical support for this dangerous stunt. By the time rescuers managed to reach Roy and bring him down, it was too late. He was rushed to a hospital in Siliguri, 280 miles away, but was pronounced dead on arrival. Doctors determined he had suffered a massive heart attack, likely triggered by the extreme stress and trauma of being suspended by his hair for so long. Later investigations revealed that Roy had not obtained official permission for the stunt. He was not on duty, confirmed K. Jayaraman, commissioner of the Siliguri Metropolitan Police. He was on leave while performing it. Roy's younger brother Benoy, who witnessed the stunt for the first time that day, expressed the family's grief. "We were proud of his bravery. He was sure to win, but destiny has taken his life and the most beloved member of our family as well." In a cruel twist of fate, Roy's wife had reportedly urged him to stop performing such dangerous stunts. According to a friend who wished to remain anonymous, his wife used to urge him to quit doing dangerous stunts. Mr. Roy convinced her that crossing the Teesta River would be his last. Unfortunately, that became his last stunt. It was November 22, 2018 in Broadstone, Dorset, England. Elena Struthers-Gardner, known to friends as Lena, was going about her day in the home she shared with her wife Mandy. At 60 years old, Elena's life had been marked by both triumph and struggle, a journey that would end in one of the most bizarre accidents ever recorded. In her younger days, Elena had been a talented jockey with a promising career ahead of her. She trained in eventing, show jumping, and dressage, working with prestigious national hunt horses in Newbury, Berkshire. Her passion for equestrian sports defined her early life, but everything changed when she was just 21 years old. A devastating riding accident left Elena with multiple fractures to her lumbar spine, resulting in severe scoliosis and chronic debilitating pain. The injuries dramatically altered her mobility. Mandy would later describe how Elena would suddenly fall like a sack of potatoes without warning. These unpredictable collapses became a regular part of their lives together. For years, Elena managed her pain with high doses of fentanyl. When doctors began reducing her medication, she developed a dependency on alcohol, reportedly consuming about a pint of vodka mixed with orange juice daily. She often drank from a mason jar with a screw-top lid, using a 10-inch stainless steel straw, an eco-friendly alternative to plastic that had become increasingly popular following campaigns against single-use plastics. That November afternoon, Elena was moving between the kitchen and living room of their home, carrying her mason jar. The stainless steel straw was fixed in place by the jar's screw-top lid, pointing upward as she walked. What happened next occurred in an instant. Elena collapsed suddenly, falling forward onto the straw. The rigid metal straw, unable to flex or move because of the lid, entered through her left eye socket and pierced her brainstem. The freak accident caused catastrophic damage to one of the most vital areas of her brain. Mandy didn't hear the fall but found Elena moments later lying face down at the doorway between their den and kitchen. She was making unusual gurgling sounds, Mandy later recalled in her statement. Her glass cup was lying on the floor still intact and the straw was still in the jar. I noticed the straw was sticking into her head. Realizing the severity of the situation, Mandy called emergency services. While I was on the phone, Lena appeared to have stopped breathing, she said. The lady on the phone asked me to turn her over. I slid the glass off the straw and turned her over. I could see the straw had gone through her left eye. Paramedics rushed Elena to Southampton General Hospital, but the injury was too severe. Specialists informed Mandy that due to the nature of the wound, there was nothing they could do to save her wife. The following day, Elena's life support was switched off. The coroner's inquest revealed the shocking details of this freak accident. Dr. David Parham, who conducted the post-mortem, confirmed that the straw had penetrated Elena's left eyelid and pierced directly into her brainstem, the part of the brain that controls basic life functions like breathing and heart rate. Assistant Coroner Brendan Allen issued a stark warning about metal straws. "There is no give in them at all," he stated. "If someone does fall on one and it's pointed in the wrong direction, serious injury can occur. It seems to me these metal straws should not be used with any form of lid that holds them in place." In the aftermath of this tragedy, Mandy shared her grief and a warning. "I miss her very much. She was taken far too early. I hope this never happens to anyone else." Elena's death, while extraordinarily rare, serves as a sobering reminder that everyday objects can sometimes pose unforeseen dangers, especially for those with mobility challenges. It was April 17, 2018, aboard Southwest Airlines Flight 1380. Jennifer Reardon, a 43-year-old bank executive from Albuquerque, New Mexico, settled into her window seat in row 14. The Boeing 737 was making its way from New York's LaGuardia Airport to Dallas Love Field, carrying 144 passengers and 5 crew members. For Jennifer, it was just another business trip, a chance to return home to her husband Michael and their 2 children after a work conference. 20 minutes into the flight, cruising at an altitude of 32,500 feet above Pennsylvania, the ordinary journey turned catastrophic in an instant. A fan blade in the left engine suddenly fractured. Having weakened from metal fatigue after more than 32,000 flights, the blade, spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute, broke free with devastating force. The engine's protective housing failed to contain the shrapnel as designed. Pieces of metal tore through the engine casing and struck the fuselage with explosive power. One fragment hit with such force that it shattered the window directly beside Jennifer's seat. The cabin depressurized immediately. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling as the plane violently tilted 40 degrees to the left. A deafening rush of air filled the cabin, and the temperature plummeted. In that chaotic moment, the pressure differential created a powerful suction effect at the broken window. Jennifer, despite wearing her seatbelt, was partially pulled toward the 8 by 10-inch opening. The force was so strong that her upper body, head, torso, and arms, was sucked outside the aircraft into the negative 70-degree air, rushing by at over 500 miles per hour. Flight attendants Rachel Fernheimer and Shanique Mallory rushed to row 14, where they found Jennifer still restrained by her lap belt, but with her upper body hanging outside the plane. They grabbed her legs while 2 male passengers helped pull her back inside. The violent wind made communication nearly impossible as they struggled against the tremendous force. Once they managed to bring Jennifer back into the cabin, it was clear she had suffered catastrophic injuries. A retired nurse named Peggy Phillips and firefighter Andrew Needham immediately began performing CPR. If you can possibly imagine going through the window of an airplane at about 600 miles per hour and hitting either the fuselage or the wing with your body, with your face, Phillips later recalled, then I think I can probably tell you there was significant trauma. In the cockpit, Captain Tammy Jo Schultz, a former Navy fighter pilot, remained remarkably calm as she navigated the crippled aircraft. "We have part of the aircraft missing," she radioed to air traffic control. "We're going to need to slow down a bit." Her steady voice betrayed none of the chaos unfolding behind her as she executed an emergency landing at Philadelphia International Airport. Despite the medical team's desperate efforts, Jennifer's injuries were too severe. The Philadelphia medical examiner later determined she died from blunt impact trauma to her head, neck, and torso. The force of the impact and the extreme conditions had caused fatal injuries almost instantly. Jennifer Reardon was more than just the first passenger fatality on a U.S. commercial airline in 9 years. She was a beloved community leader who managed volunteer service for over 1,000 employees at Wells Fargo. Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller described her as a thoughtful leader who has long been part of the fabric of our community. Her husband Michael was left to break the devastating news to their children. "I immediately thought of the kids and how do you tell your kids their mom was gone?" he later shared in an interview. The NTSB investigation revealed that the fan blade that failed had shown signs of metal fatigue as early as 2012, but the inspection techniques used then weren't adequate to detect the microscopic cracks. In response to the tragedy, airlines accelerated inspections of similar engines and implemented more sophisticated testing methods. Jennifer's death, as sudden as it was shocking, led to important safety improvements that may save countless lives in the future. A small consolation for the family who lost a wife, mother, and community pillar in the most unimaginable way. It was September 11th, 1973, in Ventura County, California. The morning sun beat down on the tarmac as Henry Smolinski and Hal Blake prepared for what they believed would be a groundbreaking test flight. Their creation, the AVE Mizar, better known as the Flying Pinto, sat ready on the runway, a bizarre hybrid of automobile and aircraft that promised to revolutionize transportation forever. Smolinski, born in 1933 in Cuyahoga, Ohio, was no amateur. After studying at the Northrop Institute of Technology's Aeronautical Engineering School, he had built an impressive career at North American Aviation and later at Rocketdyne, working on jet engines, aircraft design, and missile development. But he dreamed of something greater, a vehicle that could seamlessly transition from road to sky. In 1971, Smolinski left his secure job and teamed up with his friend Hal Blake to form Advanced Vehicle Engineers, AVE, in Van Nuys, California. Their sole mission, to create the world's first commercially viable flying car. The concept was deceptively simple. Take a Ford Pinto, attach it to the wings and rear engine of a Cessna Skymaster, and create a vehicle that could drive to an airport, take flight, land at another airport, and continue by road. The Mizar wasn't designed to transform mid-journey like something from a science fiction movie. Instead, the car and plane sections were separate modular pieces. The driver would attach the wings to the roof and a propeller to the hood at the airport, then take off using both the car engine and aircraft engine for extra power during launch. Once airborne, the craft had a cruising speed of 130 miles per hour, a range of over 1,000 miles, and a ceiling of 12,000 feet. Early tests showed promise. In 1973, the Mizar became a sensation, with Galpin Ford of Sepulveda, California, signing on as a national distributor. Smolinski wooed the public with ambitious sales pitches, claiming the vehicle was so simple that a woman can easily put the two systems together or separate them without help. The price tag would be $15,000 at full production, making flight accessible to the average American. But beneath the hype lurked fatal flaws. The Pinto, already infamous for its tendency to explode in rear-end collisions, was dangerously overloaded. The National Transportation Safety Board would later determine that even without passengers or fuel, the Mizar exceeded its maximum weight capacity. Poor welds and loose parts plagued the vehicle, particularly where the wing struts attached to the Pinto's body panels. These issues had already surfaced during a test flight in August 1973, when pilot Charles Red Janice experienced the right wing strut beginning to detach mid-flight. Through skillful flying, he managed to land the damaged craft in a bean field and drive it back to the airport. Despite this warning sign, Smolinski and Blake pressed forward, even adding a more powerful 300 horsepower engine that further strained the already compromised structure. On that fateful September day, Janice was unavailable for the scheduled test. Instead of postponing, Smolinski and Blake decided to pilot the Mizar themselves. Breaking protocol, they failed to notify airport manager Mac Grisham of their flight, preventing him from alerting local emergency services as was standard procedure. The takeoff initially seemed successful. The Mizar climbed to about 1,000 feet during the first 2 minutes of flight. Then disaster struck. The right wing folded in, the same weakness that had nearly doomed an earlier test. The added weight of the new engine had proven too much, causing critical welds to fail. The wings separated from the car, sending the vehicle into an uncontrollable spin. Air traffic controller Danny Edwards watched the tragedy unfold through his binoculars. Another witness saw the craft strike a tree, crash onto a pickup truck parked in the street, and burst into flames. Smolinski and Blake were killed instantly. The NTSB investigation confirmed what many had feared. The Mizar was fundamentally unsafe, overweight, and poorly constructed. With the death of its creators, the flying car project was abandoned, and AVE shut down. The dream of a flying car accessible to everyday Americans died that day in Ventura County, another victim of ambition outpacing safety, of innovation without adequate caution. The Flying Pinto became a cautionary tale of how quickly the miracle of flight can turn deadly when engineering principles are compromised by dreams of glory. It was January 19th, 1985 at the Houston Astrodome. The air buzzed with anticipation as 35,000 spectators filled the stadium for a thrill show and destruction derby. Among the scheduled performances was Karel Susek, a 37-year-old Canadian daredevil who had made a name for himself as the first person in 23 years to conquer Niagara Falls in a barrel. Susek was no stranger to danger. Born in Czechoslovakia, he had built a reputation as a fearless stuntman. On July 2nd, 1984, he had plunged over the 176-foot Horseshoe Falls in a custom-built barrel, surviving a 20-second drop and 45 minutes trapped in the rapids below. He emerged with minor cuts, bruises, and a broken tooth, plus a $500 fine for performing the illegal stunt. The feat earned him the self-proclaimed title of Last of the Niagara Daredevils. But conquering Niagara wasn't enough. Susek wanted more danger, more spectacle, more fame. For tonight's stunt, he planned to drop 180 feet from the roof of the Astrodome into a 12-foot wide, 9-foot deep water tank. He had spent $15,000 preparing for this moment, constructing a specially designed barrel made of metal and plastic. Legendary stuntman Evel Knievel, who was at the event, had tried to talk Susek out of the attempt, calling it the most dangerous stunt I've ever seen. But Susek was determined. The crowd watched as he was hoisted to the ceiling of the massive stadium, his barrel dangling precariously from a crane. Inside the barrel, Susek was curled up, waiting for the drop that would either cement his legacy or end his life. The plan was simple: release the barrel, let it fall straight down, and land safely in the center of the water tank below. But as workers prepared to release him, problems emerged. The barrel began spinning wildly. It started spinning real bad, one worker later recalled. After a while, the people started getting so impatient that we went ahead and dropped him. Just as we started to release the barrel, it started spinning again. That fatal spin sealed Susek's fate. As the barrel plummeted toward the ground, the rotation threw off its trajectory. Instead of landing squarely in the water tank, it clipped the edge. The impact was devastating. The barrel crashed into the rim of the tank before splashing into the water. The crowd initially applauded, thinking the stunt was successful, but a hush quickly spread as paramedics rushed to the scene. Susek was still alive when they cut him out of the barrel, but his injuries were catastrophic. The impact had crushed his chest and abdomen and fractured his skull. Emergency responders rushed him to Ben Taub Hospital, but it was too late. Karel Susek died in the early hours of January 20th, 1985. Out of respect for Susek and his family, no announcement was made to the crowd as the show continued. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the stunt community. Susek had pushed the boundaries of what was possible, but in doing so, had crossed the line between daring and recklessness. His death raised questions about the ethics of such dangerous public performances and the price of fame. In a cruel twist of fate, Susek was buried in Drummond Hill Cemetery in Niagara Falls, not far from where he had achieved his greatest triumph just months earlier. The barrel that had safely carried him over Niagara Falls now sat in a museum, a testament to his successful conquest of nature's might. But the barrel from the Astrodome was destroyed, a grim reminder of human limitations. Karel Susek lived and died by his own rules, pushing the limits of what was possible. His story serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the line between triumph and tragedy is as thin as the edge of a water tank, and even the most careful planning can't account for a simple spin that changes everything. It was February 22, 2020, in the vast desert outside Barstow, California. The air was electric with anticipation as Michael "Mad Mike" Hughes, a 64-year-old daredevil and self-taught rocketeer, prepared for what would become his final launch. A small crowd of friends, journalists, and a Science Channel film crew gathered to witness his homemade steam-powered rocket attempt to reach 5,000 feet above the desert floor. Hughes was no ordinary thrill-seeker. A limousine driver by trade, he had set a Guinness World Record in 2002 for the longest limousine jump, 103 feet in a stretch Lincoln Town car. But his true passion lay in the skies. Over the years, he had become a prominent figure in the flat Earth community, though those close to him believed he used this belief mainly to gain publicity and funding for his rocket projects. The rocket itself was a testament to Mad Mike's ingenuity, built in his backyard with the help of his partner Waldo Stakes for around $18,000. The contraption looked like something from a science fiction movie, a steel missile powered by steam ejected through a nozzle. Hughes had successfully launched himself twice before, reaching 1,875 feet in March 2018 and walking away with only back pain. Today's launch was being filmed for Homemade Astronauts, a Science Channel series chronicling amateur rocket makers. The stakes were higher than ever. Hughes had dreams of eventually reaching the Kármán line, the boundary between Earth's atmosphere and outer space, 62 miles above ground. Today's flight was just another step toward that ultimate goal. As final preparations were made, a steel ladder meant to help Hughes enter the cockpit remained attached to the launch ramp, a critical oversight that would prove fatal. Hughes climbed into the rocket, strapped himself in, and braced for the ride of his life. The countdown began, tension mounting with each passing second. The engines roared to life, steam billowing as the rocket prepared to launch. Then, in an instant, it shot upward. But as it left the ramp, disaster struck. The rocket collided with the forgotten ladder, causing a critical malfunction. The impact ripped off a parachute canister, deploying it prematurely. The crowd watched in horror as the parachute flapped uselessly behind the rocket, caught in its thrust. The rocket wobbled and veered off course, reaching an unknown altitude, nowhere near the 5,000 feet Hughes had hoped for, before it arced back toward Earth. Seconds stretched into eternity as the rocket plummeted downward, the engine still burning as it crashed into the desert floor nearly a mile from the launch pad. The impact was catastrophic. Medical personnel standing by rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Mad Mike Hughes was pronounced dead at the crash site. News of his death spread quickly, shocking fans worldwide. Those who knew Hughes weren't entirely surprised by his end. He often spoke about living life to the fullest, once saying in a documentary, "We are supposed to come to the end of our lives not with anything left, but everything exhausted. The tires are blown down, you're out of gasoline, you're coming to a screeching halt. You know you have done everything you can possibly do." In death as in life, Mad Mike remained controversial, a man who rejected conventional wisdom and safety standards in pursuit of his dreams. The Science Channel released a statement, "Our thoughts and prayers go out to Mike Hughes' family and friends during this difficult time. It was always his dream to do this launch, and Science Channel was there to chronicle his journey." Mad Mike Hughes died as he lived, pushing boundaries, defying expectations, and reaching for the stars in his own unconventional way. It was June 18, 2023, in the frigid waters of the North Atlantic Ocean. The morning air was cool and thick with fog as Stockton Rush, the 61-year-old CEO of OceanGate, prepared to pilot his experimental submersible on a journey to the most famous shipwreck on Earth. The Titan, a cramped 22-foot-long cylinder with a carbon fiber hull, was about to embark on its fateful mission to the Titanic, resting 12,500 feet below the surface. Rush was no ordinary businessman, a descendant of two signers of the Declaration of Independence. He had been a commercial jet pilot at just 19 years old, studied aerospace engineering at Princeton, and later built his own experimental aircraft. But his true passion lay beneath the waves. In 2009, he founded OceanGate with a vision to revolutionize deep-sea exploration and make it accessible to wealthy adventurers willing to pay $250,000 per seat. Joining Rush on this expedition were four paying mission specialists: British billionaire Hamish Harding, renowned French diver Paul-Henri Nargeolet, Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood, and his 19-year-old son Suleiman. As they boarded the Titan from the Canadian research vessel Polar Prince, they knew they were embarking on something extraordinary and risky. The Titan was unlike any other deep-sea submersible. Traditional vessels use spherical titanium hulls, but Rush had opted for a cylindrical carbon fiber design that experts had repeatedly warned was dangerous at such depths. The submersible was controlled by a modified Logitech F710 gaming controller, and instead of traditional viewports, it featured a single 21-inch window made of acrylic. "If you just want to be safe, don't get out of bed," Rush had once told a reporter. "At some point, safety is just pure waste. I mean, if you just want to be safe, don't get in your car, don't do anything." For years, industry experts had raised alarms about the Titan's design. In 2018, a group of more than 38 deep-sea specialists sent Rush a letter expressing unanimous concern about the vessel's safety. OceanGate's former director of marine operations, David Lockridge, had been fired after warning about potential catastrophic hull failure. Even submersible expert Carl Stanley had emailed Rush after hearing disturbing cracking noises during a 2019 test dive, writing that the sounds indicated a serious flaw in the hull. Rush dismissed these warnings as attempts by the industry establishment to stifle innovation. "I've broken some rules to make this," he once boasted. "The carbon fiber and titanium? There's a rule you don't do that." that? Well, I did. As the Titan began its descent that morning, communications with the surface ship remained normal for the first hour and 45 minutes. Then suddenly, all contact was lost. On the surface, the Polar Prince crew waited anxiously, hoping for a signal that would never come. What happened in those final moments can only be surmised. As the Titan approached depths of around 12,000 feet, the immense pressure, nearly 6,000 pounds per square inch, proved too much for the experimental hull. The carbon fiber cylinder catastrophically imploded, creating a shockwave so powerful that underwater microphones detected it from miles away. The implosion would have been instantaneous, killing all 5 men in milliseconds. Before their brains could even register what was happening, the vessel was crushed with such force that it was reduced to fragments scattered across the ocean floor, not far from the very shipwreck they had hoped to explore. For 4 days, the world watched as a massive international search operation unfolded, counting down the hours until the Titan's oxygen supply would be exhausted. But those who understood deep-sea physics knew the truth almost immediately. No one could have survived such a catastrophic implosion. On June 22nd, the U.S. Coast Guard confirmed what many had feared. Debris from the Titan had been found near the Titanic wreckage. Stockton Rush, the man who dreamed of opening the deep ocean to tourism, had joined the ranks of inventors killed by their own creations, a modern Icarus whose ambition to innovate had cost him and 4 others their lives. It was a warm summer day on June 13, 2006, in the quiet town of Hondo, New Mexico. Inside a sprawling studio, renowned sculptor Luis Jimenez was putting the finishing touches on what would become his most infamous creation, a colossal 32-foot-tall fiberglass Mustang horse commissioned by Denver International Airport. Jimenez, born in El Paso, Texas in 1940 to a family with Mexican roots, had spent his childhood in his father's electric sign shop, where he learned the crafts of neon lights, spray painting, and welding, skills that would later define his unique artistic style. His sculptures were unmistakable, vibrant, larger-than-life fiberglass creations that captured the spirit of Hispanic and Southwestern themes with bold colors and dramatic forms. By 2006, Jimenez had become one of America's most celebrated sculptors. His work was featured in prestigious institutions like the Smithsonian Museum of American Art and the Whitney Museum. Despite being blind in one eye and having suffered a heart attack, his passion for art remained undiminished. The blue Mustang, with its piercing neon red eyes, a tribute to his father's sign shop, was meant to embody the wild, untamed spirit of the American West. For nearly a decade, Jimenez had labored on this massive sculpture. He had missed 4 deadlines for the Denver Commission, the latest being May 31st, 2006. The city had even attempted to get their money back and hire someone else to finish the job, but Jimenez refused to give up his creation. He was determined to complete it himself, regardless of the challenges. That fateful day, Jimenez was using a hoist to move one of 3 massive sections of the blue Mustang. The studio was filled with the sounds of machinery and the scent of fiberglass resin. Without warning, the section, weighing hundreds of pounds, broke loose from the hoist. In a split second, the massive piece came crashing down, pinning the 65-year-old artist against a steel support beam. The impact severed an artery in his leg. Blood pooled rapidly on the studio floor as Jimenez fought for his life. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Luis Jimenez was pronounced dead at the Lincoln County Medical Center, killed by the very creation he had poured his heart and soul into for nearly a decade. The news of Jimenez's death sent shockwaves through the art world. New Mexico's governor ordered flags to be flown at half-staff in honor of the artist. Despite the tragedy, Jimenez's sons were determined to complete their father's vision. In February 2008, the blue Mustang was finally installed at Denver International Airport, standing tall on its hind legs, with its fiery red eyes glowing day and night. The sculpture quickly earned the nickname Blucifer from locals who found it unsettling. The massive blue horse became instantly controversial, not just for its intense appearance, but because of the tragic circumstances of its creation. Some even claimed the sculpture was cursed. Yet over time, this fierce Mustang has become an iconic symbol of Denver, embodying both the wild spirit of the West and the untamed creative force of its creator. Luis Jimenez lived as he died, pushing boundaries, refusing to compromise, and creating art that demanded attention. His blue Mustang stands as a testament to an artist who couldn't be tamed, whose wild spirit lives on in his final, most powerful creation. In the art world, Jimenez is remembered not just for how he died, but for how he lived, with passion, determination, and an unwavering commitment to his vision. The blue Mustang ensures that his legacy will never be forgotten, a 32-foot-tall reminder of the price sometimes paid for artistic greatness. Thanks for for watching. These stories were just the beginning. There's a whole world of danger, ambition, and the human spirit pushed to its limits, still to uncover. Stick around. It only gets wilder from here.
The internet loves a good Karen story, entitled Customers Melting Down Over Minor Inconveniences. But what happens when that same entitlement leaves the comment section and turns deadly? These are 6 of the most disturbing Karen deaths. It was December 5th, 2018, deep in the quiet outskirts of Monroe County, Michigan, where the winter air pressed cold and heavy against the trees. At the end of a long, rutted gravel road sat 2 properties divided by a sagging fence. One belonging to a retired veteran seeking isolation, the other to a woman who had never learned to leave people alone. Deborah Miller, 51, had moved to the countryside 2 years earlier after selling her condo in the city. She told people she wanted peace and space, but in practice, she brought conflict wherever she went. In Monroe County, she clashed immediately with her nearest neighbor, a reclusive Vietnam veteran named Walter Briggs. She accused him of running machinery too late at night and once reported him to the county over an imagined zoning violation. Locals joked that Deborah treated rural living like a homeowners association board meeting. Her new lifestyle came with none of the structure she'd had in the city. She spent mornings posting pictures of her poodle, Daisy, and arguing with strangers on community pages about leash laws. The gravel road between her yard and Briggs's was poorly fenced, and the veteran had warned her multiple times to keep the dog contained. Still, Deborah dismissed him as paranoid. That December morning, when Daisy slipped under the fence and disappeared, Deborah likely didn't think. She reacted. She decided that her neighbor had done something to her dog. The temperature was just above freezing when she stomped down the gravel drive, shouting the dog's name. Briggs's property was marked by clear "no trespassing" signs, but Deborah ignored them, marching past an old pickup and onto the front porch. She began pounding on the door, her voice sharp and rising. Her words echoed across the trees, pulling Briggs from a medicated sleep inside. He had been prescribed sedatives to manage his night terrors, the kind that left him disoriented when startled. The security camera mounted above the porch later filled in the missing seconds. The door opens abruptly. Briggs, still in a faded t-shirt, holding a 12-gauge pump shotgun angled toward the ground. Deborah steps closer instead of retreating, pointing at him and shouting. She gestures wildly, stepping into his personal space. When Briggs raises the weapon slightly in warning, Deborah lunges forward, both hands out, either to shove it aside or grab it. The camera shows a scuffle, a blur of motion, a hand on the barrel, then a single blast. Deborah collapses instantly, the recoil throwing Briggs backward into the doorway. Briggs kneels beside her, shaking, trying to compress the wound as blood darkens the wood beneath them. Neighbors reported hearing his panicked calls for help. Deputies arrived within 15 minutes to find Briggs unarmed, sitting motionless beside her body. She had been struck in the upper chest. The wound was unsurvivable. The poodle was later found unharmed, wandering the tree line behind both properties. Investigators confirmed Briggs's weapon was legally owned and that Deborah had crossed onto his porch without consent. Witness statements and prior police reports documented her repeated harassment of Briggs over minor grievances. The sheriff's department ruled the incident self-defense, citing the circumstances and Deborah's aggressive behavior. In the weeks that followed, local residents placed new "no trespassing" signs at the end of their drives. The case was quietly closed, but news circulated as an example of how arrogance can turn fatal when mixed with fear and isolation. It was May 20th, 2017, a bright Saturday morning in San Marino, California, the kind of day that drew tourists and socialites alike to the manicured calm of the Huntington Library and Botanical Gardens. The museum staff had prepared for a full weekend of guided tours. No one expected that by noon, the Serenity would be replaced by sirens and a body bag. Patricia Lowell, 48, was the kind of person who turned every shared space into a stage. A well-dressed Pasadena socialite and habitual committee volunteer, she prided herself on bringing energy to events others called refined. She had married into money early, filling her empty hours with charity galas, interior design workshops, and a small lifestyle account that rarely reached beyond her social circle. On the morning of the 20th, she joined a friend for a docent-led tour at the Huntington's European Sculpture Gallery, a serene space lined with marbles and plaster casts on wooden plinths. The docent, a retired art historian, opened with a standard warning. The statues were old, delicate, and in some cases, reconstructed over fragile supports. Patricia rolled her eyes audibly. She whispered to her friend that if something was that breakable, it shouldn't be on display. When the group reached Diana the Huntress, a 19th century plaster reproduction of an 18th century French marble, Patricia saw her chance for attention. The docent gently reminded everyone not to cross the velvet barrier. Patricia ignored her, stepping over it with practiced entitlement. Security footage later showed her brushing off a warning hand from her friend. She leaned back against the figure, laughing, arm extended for a selfie. The plinth beneath the statue gave a quiet creak. A few visitors gasped. Patricia turned her head and, smirking, tapped the statue's hip as if to prove her point. The structure failed in seconds. The plinth tilted forward, and the top-heavy sculpture lurched. The reproduction, weighing roughly 300 to 400 pounds, slid off its base, its outstretched arm striking her shoulder before the torso slammed into her chest. The marble floor amplified the impact, a hollow, irreversible sound. Patricia went down instantly, pinned beneath the shattered remains. Dust clouded the air, and tourists screamed. One man tried to lift the figure, but the broken mass was too heavy. Staff initiated an emergency closure procedure while calling 911. Paramedics and firefighters from the San Marino Fire Department arrived within 7 minutes. But the injury was unsurvivable. The autopsy cited massive blunt force trauma and internal hemorrhage. Museum staff closed the gallery for weeks, and the damaged sculpture was moved into storage, its fragments too ruined to restore. The Huntington issued a brief statement acknowledging the tragedy and reinforcing its safety protocols. Her family's reaction was muted and divided. Her husband, a local businessman, refused media contact, leaving flowers at the museum gate in private. Her adult children reportedly argued about whether to mention the circumstances publicly. The eventual obituary cited a sudden accident without details. It was July 4th, 2015, on Coronado Beach in San Diego, California. Families crowded the shoreline for fireworks and barbecues. To most, it was a holiday afternoon, sun, noise, and celebration. But for Darla Hennepin, it was another day to assert control. Darla, 45, had lived in Coronado her entire life, divorced, childless, and financially comfortable from her late parents' estate. She filled her days with neighborhood watch meetings and complaint calls to the city. Locals described her as high-strung and combative, particularly when she deemed her peace was disturbed. She had fought every noise permit, every parking expansion, every drone license she could file against. Her habits were predictable. Each morning she staked out the same square of sand, bordered by windbreakers and coolers that formed a defensive perimeter. She owned a folding cart labeled "Private Property" in marker. The aluminum poles she used to mount her beach shade, a 10-foot telescoping rod, technically meant for flags or boat masts, was polished from constant handling. Darla liked tools that looked official, things that signaled authority. That illusion of control would fail her the instant she turned that pole from decoration into weaponry. That afternoon, the winds intensified. A freelance photographer, hired by a local tourism board, piloted a small drone over the beach to capture crowd footage. The craft hovered nearly 60 feet up, its faint buzz lost under laughter and surf. But Darla fixated on it. To her, it represented intrusion, proof that her space had been violated again. Witnesses later said she began muttering under her breath before storming toward the man's setup near the access road. He explained his credentials, an FAA permit. But Darla dismissed him, calling him a creep and voyeur. After failing to get him to stop, She returned to her car, face flushed and determined. When she came back, she carried the aluminum pole. People nearby assumed she was adjusting her shade. Instead, she walked straight toward the descending drone. The photographer yelled for her to leave it alone, but she was already mid-sprint. Sand kicked up around her bare feet as she swung the pole overhead, missing the drone entirely. The effort unbalanced her stance. As she tried again, the tip of the pole arced upward, striking an overhead 12,000-volt distribution line running above the access road. The explosion was instantaneous. A burst of white-blue light engulfed her. The sound, a sharp crack followed by a low electrical hum, froze the crowd. Witnesses said her body stiffened mid-step, arms locked around the pole. For a moment, she seemed suspended before collapsing to the sand. Several beachgoers hesitated, unsure if it was safe to touch her, before one man called emergency services and another cautiously began CPR. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Darla's hand showed deep burns where it had touched the pole, and parts of her clothing were singed. She wasn't breathing, and despite resuscitation attempts, she showed no response. She was declared dead on sight. Investigators found clear scorch marks leading from the contact point down through her sandals, the current exiting through damp sand. Electrical engineers later confirmed she'd struck a 12,000-volt distribution line, an almost certain instant death. In the days that followed, the city framed the event as a tragic accident during a crowded holiday. Safety reminders about power lines were added to beach access signs. Darla's family held a private cremation in La Jolla. Few attended. Neighbors left small flowers near the site, not from sympathy, but acknowledgement. It was January 28, 2018, at the Alpine Lodge and Spa in Aspen, Colorado. Inside the glass walls of the pool complex, only the hum of filtration pumps and the faint rippling of water broke the stillness. A 55-year-old guest, known among the staff for her relentless complaints, had finally found a moment where no one could tell her no. Monica Braithwaite came from money, but not warmth. Divorced twice, she split her time between real estate investments and luxury retreats, convinced her spending granted her special privilege. At every property she visited, she left a trail of incident reports, arguments with front desk staff, threats of online reviews, confrontations over non-existent service lapses. She demanded bottled water brands few hotels carried and often inspected sheets for microscopic imperfections. Her life revolved around control, and Aspen was supposed to be her winter refuge. The Alpine Lodge was designed for comfort at altitude. Sealed glass enclosures, automated heating, and natural gas systems calibrated for efficiency. The indoor-outdoor pool maintained a stable 82 degrees Fahrenheit through a thermostat-controlled heater in an adjacent service room. It was safe, modern, and unremarkable, unless someone tampered with it. Staff were trained never to exceed set parameters, since gas-based systems in thin mountain air could vent improperly. That restriction made sense to everyone except Monica, who saw it as defiance. That afternoon, she stormed out of the spa when told the pool was at temperature. Several witnesses overheard her muttering about lazy employees and cheap operations. The young attendant she confronted tried to remain polite, repeating that adjustments required management approval. When the general manager reinforced that policy, Monica left in icy silence, face taut with restrained fury. Security cameras later showed her returning just before midnight, wrapped in a white robe, slippers scraping against the tile. The service door was slightly ajar. Maintenance had left it unsecured after calibrating the filtration pump earlier that evening. Monica slipped through. Inside, the equipment room was humid and warm, lit by a single flickering fluorescent tube. She located the heater, an older but functional natural gas unit, and spotted the manual control valve. She twisted it with both hands, grunting as the metal resisted. When it finally gave way, she likely heard the faint roar of ignition. What she couldn't see was the small crack in the flue gasket, a fracture that allowed exhaust gases to leak directly into the closed air system. In the thin, low-oxygen air of Aspen, incomplete combustion worsened the buildup. creating a dense pocket of carbon monoxide near floor level. Over the next 15 minutes, carbon monoxide displaced breathable air. Monica reclined on a lounge chair beside the pool, satisfied with herself. Within minutes, the first symptoms, lightheadedness, confusion, would have begun. Witness reconstruction suggests she stood up, staggered toward the service door, then collapsed near the heater switch. The gas continued to build overnight. By morning, the concentration exceeded 1,800 to 2,000 parts per million. Levels fatal in under 2 minutes of exposure. At 7:42 a.m., the same attendant from the previous day discovered her lying on the tile floor. He immediately called emergency services. He reported finding a woman unresponsive near the spa pool, unsure if she was breathing. Within 5 minutes, paramedics and firefighters arrived, evacuating the building and beginning CPR. A portable gas detector went off as soon as they entered, so they put on full breathing gear and started airing out the building. Fire crews later measured dangerously high carbon monoxide levels throughout the facility before shutting down the system. The official cause: acute carbon monoxide poisoning. In the following weeks, the Braithwaite family filed a wrongful death suit alleging negligence. Investigators, however, found security footage confirming unauthorized entry. Records showed Monica had filed similar comfort complaints at 3 previous resorts. The hotel paid for a full ventilation overhaul costing more than $100,000. For a time, guests would still ask about the rumor of a woman found by the pool, but the questions dissipated over time. It was September 15th, 2016, at Wat Phra Sing in Chiang Mai, Thailand. The air was heavy with humidity, and rain from the morning monsoon clung to every polished surface. The temple's bells chimed softly in the distance as visitors moved quietly, sandals stacked neatly by the entrance. Amid the calm reverence, one foreign tourist was growing restless. Chloe Davenport, 39, tried to make her living on contrarian travel content. Her channel was built on disdain. She positioned herself as a truth teller, claiming to expose fake tourism experiences. In reality, her videos drew small audiences who watched more for the spectacle than the insight. Brands had stopped sponsoring her months before, citing unprofessional tone. Yet Chloe remained convinced she was on the verge of a breakout moment. She micromanaged her boyfriend, who doubled as cameraman, and berated locals when they didn't cooperate with them. Her reputation for confrontations had followed her through hostels across Southeast Asia. Temples like Wat Phra Sing, especially during the monsoon season, required care and awareness. The marble terraces became slick from condensation and tracked in rainwater. Signs warned visitors in multiple languages to remove shoes for safety and respect. Monks cleaned the floors frequently, keeping them pristine but dangerously polished when damp. Tour guides routinely reminded tourists to walk slowly, especially near the upper terrace steps. To most visitors, the rules were simple: tradition and caution intertwined. But to Chloe, they were just another obstacle to her content. That afternoon, she arrived under gray skies, complaining about the dreary light and the smell of incense. The temple's courtyard glistened under scattered droplets, and her boyfriend reminded her about the posted warnings. Chloe dismissed him, filming herself mocking the signs before a robed monk approached. Witnesses later recalled her loud, cutting tone as she argued that removing shoes was unsanitary. The monk remained calm, pointing again toward the rack by the gate. Finally, Chloe yanked off her sandals in exaggerated frustration. She stepped onto the terrace, phone angled upward, her bare soles slapping quickly against the wet marble as she moved without caution. Other tourists treaded carefully, some stopping to watch her perform. She moved fast, impatient, pacing backward for a wider shot and grumbling about stupid rules. Her boyfriend raised his arm in warning as she shifted weight onto her left foot. The instant it slipped, her balance broke completely. Her legs shot forward and her upper body snapped backward, striking the floor with audible force. The impact fractured the back of her skull and caused an immediate loss of consciousness. Momentum carried her toward the nearby staircase, where her head struck the first stone step before her body tumbled down several more. By the time she stopped at the bottom, her phone had skidded several feet away. Tourists rushed over. A monk knelt beside her, checking for breathing and pulse but not attempting to move her, while others shouted for help in Thai. Temple staff activated the local emergency line, and an ambulance arrived within minutes. Paramedics began CPR, but quickly determined that her injuries were incompatible with survival. A basilar skull fracture with cervical trauma, consistent with a high-energy fall onto stone. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The Thai authorities reviewed the footage and ruled the death accidental, citing unsafe conduct in a restricted area. The temple closed the terrace for 2 days to perform a cleansing ceremony and placed additional safety mats and signage afterward. Chloe's family released no public statement. Her online accounts were taken down upon their request. Among the travel community in Chiang Mai, her name became shorthand for what happens when arrogance meets gravity. It was November 3rd, 2017, at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Gate B-42. The storm outside was relentless. Inside, hundreds of grounded passengers sat in tense silence, faces lit by phones and flight boards that never changed. The atmosphere was heavy but resigned, except for one woman whose rising voice cut through the hum of exhaustion. Linda Ferguson, 50, was a senior operations manager for a mid-tier logistics firm based in Naperville. Her professional life was defined by control. She thrived on being the loudest presence in any room. Subordinates described her as demanding to the point of cruelty, and she carried that same energy everywhere. Restaurants, stores, and especially airports. She prided herself on her efficiency, but mistook impatience for competence. Her management style rewarded confrontation, and years of getting her way had eroded any filter between impulse and action. Travel had always been a stage for her worst behavior. O'Hare, with its chaos and delays, was the perfect storm for her temperament. She insisted on flying business class for domestic trips, considering it a sign of professional success. Her company covered the costs reluctantly, preferring to avoid the inevitable tantrums that came with denying her requests. On this particular trip, she was returning from a quarterly review meeting in Boston, already seething over the client's unrealistic expectations. When weather delays hit Chicago, grounding every outbound flight, she saw it not as an act of nature, but as a personal insult. By early evening, Gate B-42 had become a pressure cooker. The storm showed no sign of easing, and the gate agent, a young employee named Ben Alvarez, was fielding a line of frustrated passengers alone. When Linda reached the front, she demanded immediate rebooking, a hotel voucher, and an upgrade. Ben explained that due to the widespread cancellations, all accommodations were being processed by the system queue. Witnesses said her voice escalated with every word. She accused the airline of targeting her, then leaned over the counter, her face inches from Ben's, as the waiting area fell silent. Security footage later reconstructed what followed. When Ben attempted to type on his terminal, Linda snapped that he was making it harder than it needed to be. She came around the counter despite multiple warnings. In her frustration, she decided to prove how simple the task was. She grabbed the edge of a freestanding check-in kiosk, one of the older, portable units weighing nearly 300 pounds. It contained a built-in scale, computer, and bolted monitor, mounted on a metal bracket. The unit wasn't designed to be moved manually, but maintenance staff had recently unlocked its casters for cleaning earlier that evening. As she shoved it, the top-heavy frame shifted forward instantly. Security footage later confirmed she had bypassed the counter rope barrier and initiated contact with the machine before it toppled. The kiosk teetered for half a second before tipping completely. Several witnesses gasped as the monitor edge caught her across the temple, spinning her sideways. The full mass of the kiosk followed, crashing down with her beneath it. The monitor bracket and base struck her chest and skull simultaneously, producing a sharp, hollow crack that echoed through the terminal. Passengers froze in shock before screams erupted. Ben lunged forward, but the damage was immediate and catastrophic. Massive cranial trauma. No pulse. Paramedics responding to a call from the personnel arrived within minutes. Finding her pinned under the twisted machine, lifeless. The medical examiner later confirmed the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head and thorax. The force of the impact was equivalent to being struck by a small motorcycle. The airline issued a brief internal notice, citing a fatal accident involving passenger interference with gate equipment. Legal representatives reached a confidential settlement with the Ferguson family to prevent litigation. In the days after, Ben Alvarez was kept out of the terminal while investigators reviewed footage. Co-workers said he barely spoke, staying behind closed doors in the operations room until his shift ended. He filed an incident report, then requested transfer to a non-customer-facing role. He never returned to Gate B42. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.